That's called getting somebody along under false pretences, that is.
We all go through it, I'm afraid.
Thank you, and thank you for the warm welcome. I've been to Brighton and to Brighton Church many times, and it's great to see how you've come along, you've changed, you've moved from where you were before, both in place, but also I think you've been on quite a journey, all of you, to get to where you are now. There's been lots of changes, some people have gone, new people have come, and there feels like there's a real vibrance here. I haven't been for some time, and there's a real change, there's a real energy. I'm not saying there wasn't before, and you weren't great before, but there's a sense of renewed energy here today, which is absolutely fantastic to see. For those of you who don't know me, I will tell you a little bit about myself. I'm from the East End of London, and so in some sense I suppose it's no accident that I've gone back to be the interim pastor at our church in East London. It's situated in Stepney. It's in the borough of Tower Hamlets, where there is an absolutely massive Bengali population. 70% of the population in Tower Hamlets are Bengali. So there's lots of interfaith work that we want to start doing and things like that, because sometimes it can be a difficult place to live. East London has always been a place where migrant communities have come. Migrant communities have been ostracised and been forced into these little pockets of places to be and to be safe. But we want to start down some work about building and breaking down some of those barriers that are already there. So I am an ordained minister within MCC. I've been an ordained minister for about 3 years. I was the longest clergy intern ever. I was a clergy intern for 7 years. It felt like working 7 years for Labour, and I'll tell you, it really did. Well, yeah, kind of. Yeah, I am a bit of a rebel. I do not always adhere to traditional tenets and traditional teaching sometimes, which can get me into a little bit of trouble in certain quarters. And I think they just wanted to have a good look at me and make sure I was who I said I was, really. So that's a little bit about me. I now live in Essex. Some of my family, yeah, there's Jenny, well, two Jennys, my Jenny and other Jenny from church, who have come. Jenny also lives in Essex, literally round the corner from us. So she's come along as well. We've started an outreach group in Essex. There's a real need out in Essex for an MCC type presence, so we're doing that too. We're very busy at the moment. Quite a small church. I think there's about 15 of us most weeks now. When I started there last September, there was about 4. And we've moved, again, like you, and there feels like there's a new energy, a new vibrancy in the church, so it's fantastic. So that's a little bit about us. We usually, as me saying I'm not very traditional, we usually use the Revised Common Lectionary for our readings, which is a format of readings that take you through pretty much the whole of the Bible in 3 years. And we pick readings from that. We might pick a few secular readings every now and again, but we tend to use the Revised Common Lectionary. So when Andrew said to me, the reading's a song, and it's Something Inside So Strong by Labi Siffre, I'd already started working on ideas from the lectionary readings. So I thought, oh no. And this was sort of Friday night. I was like, okay, I'll have to change the sermon a little bit then, won't I? That's fine. But the Bible, a friend of mine once told me, and any religious teaching book, it's a little bit like fugu fish. If you prepare it well, it will nurture you, but if you don't, it can kill you. Because the fugu fish is a particular fish that if you don't cook it right, it literally can kill you. And I think we have to be careful sometimes how we use religious texts and religious writings, because people have been killed for them over the years. And we have a responsibility to make sure that we use them wisely and we use them well to nourish people, and not to bash them over the head as a rule book of things you should and shouldn't be doing with your life. In the lectionary readings for this week, last week Jesus was feeding the 5,000. And there's a lot in last week and this week about bread and about food generally, and what we do with food. And so that's why I decided to, and because of it being Pride Week as well, to make the title of the sermon Food for the Journey, because we are all on a journey. And in the readings for this week, the Israelites were on a journey. They'd been taken out of slavery in Egypt, and they were on that journey through the wilderness that we're told took them 40 years. And just for a change, they were moaning. They moaned a lot during the 40 years in the wilderness that they had a little bit of a wander around. But being hungry is no joke, and that's why they were moaning. When I was a small child, and I think a couple of people from my own congregation will testify, I talk about this a lot. I talk about my mum a lot, and I talk about food a lot. But I didn't realise when I was little that we were poor. My mum could make a pan, big pan about that big, full of mushy peas, like an adventure. I didn't get it that all we had to eat that night was peas and nothing else. But we could literally go back to that big pot of peas as many times as we liked and dip a bit of bread in it or whatever else we had, and that was our meal for that night. But because she made it like an adventure, it didn't feel like we were poor, and it didn't feel like that was all we had to eat that night. And my mum was homeless for a time as well, and she always said, when you're hungry, when you're homeless, you really know what it feels like to kind of be at the bottom of the pile, where nobody wants you, where nobody loves you. People are quite often scared of you because you might be a little bit smelly, you might not exactly look how you would look normally or how other people on the street look when they're in nice clothes and everything else. So it can be a bit of a harsh time. People will purposely avoid you and walk round you and things like that. Bread was important in Jewish culture and tradition then and now, and it is for us. It's spoken about throughout the Bible and in many other sacred texts and in many other books and writings that we have. It was the base of every single meal, and it still is. I've got friends who every Sunday when they eat their Sunday dinner, they will also have a loaf of bread on the table with their Sunday dinner, and they'll dip it in their gravy after they've eaten. I know, I think it's bonkers, but they have bread on their table with their Sunday dinner. It's just them. Many people in Jesus' time and today in the Med will often eat bread and olive oil. For some, that's all they'll get. I hate bread with an absolute passion, because if ever we were hungry and we went to my mum and said, "Mum, we're starving, we want something to eat," it was bread and jam, it was bread and dripping, or it was what we called buppy bread, which was basically just bread with butter on it and sugar on it, and then you made it into a sandwich. It tasted really nice. It's nasty, but it tasted really nice. When you're a kid and you want some sugar or something like that, buppy bread is amazing. Or we had cucumber sandwiches, or we had bread and cheese, which was often a staple in this country for people going out to work in the fields. If you come from an agricultural family, you would often take with you bread and cheese. Or if, like my mum's family, you went down the mines, you took bread and cheese. That was what you had for your lunch. And so I hate it. It's still bread. You can't, doesn't matter how you try and parcel it up or try and nice it up, it's still bread. And because we ate so much of it, I don't like it. People today, around the world, there are many people who are really hungry, genuinely hungry. And I think sometimes we forget there's a real tradition within all of the Abrahamic or Ibrahimic faiths, in Judaism, Christianity, and in Islam as well, of feeding the hungry, taking care of the needy and the widows. All three of those faiths have that principle enshrined in them. It recognises our human frailty and that all of us are made the same way. We should all strive to be able to look after ourselves and look after those around us, our family members and our friends, but not all are able to. So those that can will be able to provide for those who cannot. That's what the welfare state in this country was built on. It's what the system of workhouses before that later became hospitals was built on. I remember when I was a child, my dad, it was the absolute bane of his life and his shame, he used to tell us, that he had to rely on the welfare state when he had no work, because when the docks closed in East London, his job went overnight, and so he had to find other jobs. He was a ship's boiler scaler, so he went down into the funnels of the ships to clean and descale the boilers and the funnels on the ships, and then when that dried up, he was a stevedore for a little while, getting the goods out of the boats onto the dockside. And like I said, when the docks closed, that was it. His work went overnight. And it was because of the workhouse that people thought that the welfare state was something to not use, something that other people did. You know, those people over there, they get money from the social, you know. That was the kind of conversation that went on in my house when I was a kid, even though we were poor. It was still, over there, look, they go to the social. And then when my dad had to do it, it was like, oh my goodness, now we're on the social as well. It's a right now, and it's an accepted part of our country that the welfare state looks after those who either for a time or for a long time can't look after themselves. Many of us in the UK don't really understand what it is to be truly hungry. There's a joke from a long, long time ago now that talks about heaven. And there's a person who's going up to heaven, and they get there, and St. Peter says, oh, right, okay, we're going to go in a minute, but while we're here, do you want to go and have a look at the other place, just to be nosy? And the person says, yeah, well, actually, I wouldn't mind, just to go and have a look. Okay, just to satisfy my curiosity, we'll go and have a look. So they go down, and obviously images of hell. It's very hot. It's not very nice. The people are all absolutely emaciated. They are starving, hungry, fighting each other for food. They have to eat with 6-foot-long chopsticks. And St. Peter turns to the person and says, have you had enough? Do you want to go up now? Go home? And the person says, yeah, okay, I'll go home now. I can't believe that they have to try and eat with 6-foot-long chopsticks. And St. Peter says, oh, we use 6-foot-long chopsticks in heaven as well. But in heaven, we help each other. Some of us, like I've said, I could probably go, don't know how many days I could go without food, but I am certainly not hungry, and I probably could go for a fair few days without food. I do not know, and I've never known. Like I said, we were poor, but we always had food. We always ate, and we ate quite well. Like I said, it might have only been mushy peas, but we ate. Now, people are more and more in this country having to rely on food banks. More and more of them are springing up in churches and cities around us. We know there's not enough equality in this world generally, whether that's food or anything else. And that is why we celebrate Pride and other events like it. There's Christian Aid, Muslim Aid, various other charities around the world that go and try to make sure that people do not go hungry. How can we sit here full and do nothing about it when we know that there are some out there who are hungry? Jenny and I were listening to the Iona Community Worship in bed this morning, and they were talking a lot within that about justice and about equality, as you would expect the Iona community to do. It's one of the things they do. And I'm not so holy. That's the first time I've listened to the Iona Community Worship. Jenny does it all the time. I don't. I normally just lay in bed. But it was really good, so I might listen to it again, actually, at some point. Jesus, who is one of my heroes. I am a self-confessed Jesus freak. I have been since I was about 12 years old. I take a lot of store by what that shadowy first century Jew, as a friend of mine calls him, said and did. One of the things Jesus said, he talked a lot about food. And he gave Peter, one of the disciples, the explicit instruction to feed my lambs. When I am gone, he said, feed my lambs. And there's lots of references about what Jesus said to the agricultural landscape of the time. Many of us, though, we aren't hungry for food. What do we choose to fill ourselves with that make us look like this? For some of us, we do it because it's there, because it's easily accessible, or because maybe in our childhood we didn't get enough food to eat, or maybe for other reasons. In the reading about the manna, God laid out enough food for the people to gather enough for themselves and their family for that day. And that kind of reappears in the prayer that Jesus taught that we sometimes use at communion, that says, with the bread for today, feed us. That's where it comes from. If they didn't use it, it disappeared. Or if they tried to store it up, it went off. What they got was enough for them to eat for that day. I remember a time when we used to go shopping every day. We don't anymore. We might go shopping once a week, or we might go shopping once a month when we get paid, and do little bits of shopping in between. How many of us make menus for the week that are enough for us to eat? We don't, do we? We like snacking, and we like to store things up like squirrels to make sure we've got enough, or more than enough. Why are we so fearful about not having enough of anything? But we are, aren't we? We often try to fill ourselves up with many different things, not just food. But we can use food for many different reasons. Not just to make sure we've got enough to make sure our body keeps going, like a car, to make sure it's got enough energy to get itself through the journey. Sometimes we use food for our emotional needs, because they're needs that we have, and we sometimes use food for that as well. I'm not saying it's wrong, I'm saying that we do it sometimes. I knew somebody years ago who used to eat loads and loads of food because she didn't have enough when she was little, and so that's what she did. She just ate food because she thought somewhere in her psyche that there wasn't going to be enough at some point. So she just ate a lot all the time. Some people don't eat for similar reasons, because there's another need that isn't being filled, another type of hunger. We can hunger in many different ways for many, many different things. Like I've said, we can hunger emotionally or intellectually. How many people remember the film Short Circuit in the 80s? Yeah, where you had robot number 5 that short-circuited and went a bit mad, and then went everywhere going, input, input, because it needed more intellectual data, more knowledge to go in. And some of us are a bit like that. I'm a little bit like that. I love knowledge. I absolutely love it. I was always the one in school that put the hand up because I had the right answer, always. I love it. I've got a real hunger for knowledge. And I sometimes have a little look at where that comes from. That need to kind of be right. Where does that come from? What need does that satisfy within me, within myself? People are leaving organised religion in droves. Numbers of churches and various other denominations, other different religions, are reporting a downturn in their numbers. Because organised religion is making God the fugu fish, but not preparing it very well, I think. And so people are taking the exit rather than stay and eat the fugu fish. If all you present to people is a book of rules, a load of shoulds or should nots, it doesn't nourish and provide the food that people actually need. If religion isn't feeding the lambs, then maybe us who are involved with religion need to change the milk that we're giving the lambs to make the lambs respond a little bit better. Over the years, I've done quite a bit of work in my secular work. I'm a social worker, have been for many years, worked with disabled children, looked after children, children who are taken into care away from their parents. Sometimes I've been to court and been instrumental in taking children from their parents. I've done a lot of work as well with asylum seekers, people who have been imprisoned just for wanting to escape from something that is not a good situation to be in, for whatever reason, largely because they've been LGBT and they've come to churches that I've been involved in. I've always used the phrase that if one isn't free, then none are free. And I think it's the same with any type of hunger. There is absolutely no need, with the resources that we have as human beings at our disposal, there is no need for any one of us to be hungry in any way. We do have what it takes to make sure that everybody in the world gets fed. It's a travesty, I think, an absolute travesty of our time, or any time, that anybody goes hungry. Community means that there should be no hunger. I'm not saying that you should be able to get absolutely everything you need from your community, but you should be able to get most things that you need from your community. We get different things from different places and from different people, But a community like this, where we say we are inclusive, we are there for all people, we need to actually live that. There's a verse in the Bible that I kind of use as my strapline, and it's the Micah 8 verse 6. Do justice, love mercifully, and walk humbly. Some people, this man, can somebody put up the picture? That's Reverend Elder Troy Perry. He was the guy who started MCC in 1968, October the 6th. He was a Baptist minister who was kicked out of being a Baptist minister for being queer. He lost his family, his wife and his 2 children were spirited away from him. He had a little stint in the army. He tried to commit suicide by slashing his wrists in the bath, and luckily friends found him and took him to hospital and got him sorted out. He started MCC with an advert in the newspaper, and 12 people turned up that night, on October the 6th, 1968. He, like some of the IRA hunger strikers, I remember my grandson saying to me a long time ago, he said, "What's a terrorist?" Because like I said, I still lived in East London at the time. What's a terrorist? Because he'd obviously heard something about this on the news or in the papers or at school. He was 8 years old. And I remember saying to him, I said, that depends who you're asking the question of. I said, because to some people, they will tell you somebody's a terrorist because they think they're trying to take something away from them. Be it their land or their way of life or something like that. I said, but the person on the other side will tell you that that person's a freedom fighter, that they're fighting for their rights that have been taken away from them by the other people. I said, so it depends which way you're looking at it. Reverend Troy Perry went on hunger strike. He purposely went without food to get the laws in LA changed and made more LGBT friendly. There was something called the Briggs Initiative that came out. And Troy said, I am not going to eat a scrap of food again until we raise $100,000 to fight the Briggs Initiative. He didn't eat for 16 whole days. And by the time he finished, he was emaciated. They charged him. He did his hunger strike on the steps of the federal court in LA. But they raised the $100,000 to fight the Briggs Initiative. And they did. People in power will often use fear. They will try and make us fearful of other groups or fearful of not having enough or losing something or having somebody take something from us to get us to act in a certain way. We know that the climate at the moment around the world is pretty much like it was before the Second World War. There was something that David Cameron quoted, I can't remember if it was this week or last week, about immigrants. It was exactly the same, word for word, what was said about Jews coming into the UK before the Second World War. Only this time the group is different. This time the group's Romanians, it's Muslims, it's other groups. They're coming in here, they're going to take all our money, they're going to take everything that we have, there's not going to be enough for us. Let's all be scared. Let's all be scared that these people are going to do things to us, to take our rights away or whatever. The basic message from today, from the readings and from me, is that God will provide. The earth will provide. There is enough for all of us. It's just our job to do what Jesus said, and that is feed the lambs, to make sure that all of us have enough, all of us have a place at the table, so that some don't have too much and some don't have too little. That's something inside so strong inside of us needs to come out. That's the coming out that needs to happen. We're going to have to take a stand. I'm not saying go on hunger strike. I think it takes a very brave person to go on hunger strike. It's our job, though, as stewards, to do this. We can support a food bank. We can start a food bank ourselves. We have to lobby our MPs and make them do right by the people. We elect them into office. They work for us. We need to ensure that the money we have at our disposal is spent wisely, with ethical companies that have good policies, that look after the people and look after the earth that we live on. If we rape this planet in the future the way we've been doing for hundreds of years so far, it's not always going to be here to help us and to feed us. So we need to look after it. Ask them about their policies. Ask them awkward questions. Only take as much as you need, whether it's for the day, for the week, whatever, from somebody else. Only take as much as you need. All of this starts with all of us taking small steps, and I know most of us do that already. But I want us to make a concerted effort to make more small steps within our own spheres of influence to make sure this happens, so that all of us, all of the lambs, have enough food for the journey. Amen. God bless.